Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe.
The first time my mother-in-law told me I wasn't good enough for her son, she said it in front of 37 people. The second time, she said it in front of my husband. But the third time was different. Because by then, I knew her secret. And when she stood up at that family dinner and announced that I was being removed from my husband's life, I simply looked at her and said, "Before you make that decision, maybe you should tell everyone where the missing $240,000 went." The room went silent. My husband, Ethan, slowly turned toward his mother. "What is she talking about?" My mother-in-law's face changed. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked afraid. But to understand how I got there, you have to understand what happened during the first 4 years of my marriage. My name is Lauren Carter, and when I married Ethan, I honestly believed I was marrying my best friend. We met at a coffee shop in Chicago. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the architecture firm where I worked, and I was sitting alone at a small table trying to finish a presentation. Ethan accidentally bumped into my chair. My coffee spilled across my laptop. I thought I was going to scream. Instead, he looked horrified and said, "I think I just destroyed your career." I laughed. "You definitely destroyed my coffee." He bought me another one. Then, he bought me dinner. Then somehow, 3 hours later, we were still talking. Ethan was different from anyone I dated before. He didn't care about my job. He didn't care about my salary. He cared about me. At least, that's what I believed. 3 months later, he introduced me to his family. That's when I met his mother, Victoria. She looked me up and down the moment we met. Not casually. Slowly. Like she was inspecting something she had already decided she didn't want. Then, she smiled. "So you're Lauren?" "Yes." "Ethan says you work in architecture." "I do." She nodded. "That's nice." There was something about the way she said "nice" that made it sound like an insult. I ignored it. I wanted Ethan to be happy. And he was. For the first year of our marriage, Victoria kept her distance. Then my father passed away. My father had owned a small but successful furniture manufacturing company in Ohio. I was his only child. After his death, I inherited a 35% stake in the business. It wasn't something I talked about. In fact, I didn't tell Ethan the full value of my inheritance. I simply told him that I had inherited some shares. I trusted him. But somehow, Victoria found out. A week later, she called me. "Lauren, dear, we need to talk." I was surprised. "About what?" "Your father's company." I went quiet. "How do you know about that?" She laughed softly. "Ethan told me." He hadn't. I knew that. I had never told Ethan the details. I asked her what she wanted. She said, "I think you should consider selling your shares." I thought I had misheard her. "Why?" "Because you're young. You don't need the responsibility." "I don't want to sell." She sighed. "Lauren, I'm trying to help you." "I appreciate that. You're not a businesswoman." I smiled. "Actually am." She paused. Then she said, "You're not family yet." That sentence stayed with me. Not family yet. Even though I was already married to her son, I told Ethan what happened. He apologized. "That's just Mom." "That's not an excuse." "I know." He hugged me. "I'll talk to her." I believed him. That was my first mistake. A few months later, Ethan received a promotion. He became vice president of a regional development company. His salary doubled. We bought a beautiful house in the suburbs. Everything looked perfect. But Victoria became more involved in our lives. She began coming over without calling. She criticized the furniture. She criticized my cooking. She criticized the way I dressed. Once, she opened my refrigerator and said, "You really don't cook much, do you?" I said, "I work 60 hours a week." She smiled. "So does Ethan." I didn't answer. Another time, she told me, "A wife should make her husband's home feel peaceful." I looked at her. "I think Ethan and I are doing just fine." She smiled. "For now." Then, one Sunday afternoon, she arrived at our house with a folder. She put it on the kitchen table. What is this? I asked. Financial planning documents. I opened the folder. There were documents related to my father's company. I looked at her. Why do you have these? Ethan and I have been discussing your inheritance. My stomach tightened. Ethan? And you? Yes. I closed the folder. You shouldn't be discussing my finances without me. She leaned back. I'm trying to protect my son. From what? From losing everything. I stared at her. Why would Ethan lose everything? She didn't answer. Instead, she said, you should sell the shares and put the money into a protected family account. I laughed. A family account? Yes. Who controls it? She smiled. Ethan? I stood up. No. Her expression hardened. You don't trust your husband? I trust my husband. I don't think you do. I walked to the door. She picked up her purse. Before leaving, she said, you'll regret being difficult. I thought she was simply controlling. I didn't know she was planning something much bigger. The first real warning came 6 months later. Ethan started changing. He became distant. He spent more time at work. He stopped talking about his day. One night, I asked him what was wrong. Nothing. You're lying, he sighed. Mom thinks you're hiding money from me. I stared at him. Your mother thinks I'm hiding money? Yes. And you believe her? I don't know what to believe. I felt something break inside me. Ethan, I have never lied to you about money. He looked away. I asked, has she been talking to you about my inheritance? He didn't answer. That was enough. I went upstairs. I cried for almost an hour. Not because of Victoria. Because my husband had started doubting me. The next morning I decided to do something I had never done before. I checked our joint financial accounts. There were several withdrawals I didn't recognize. $12,000. $18,500. $7,200. I called Ethan. What are these? He sounded nervous. Business expenses? From our personal account? I'll explain later. No. Explain now. He hung up. That evening, he came home with flowers. I hated those flowers because I knew they were meant to distract me. He kissed me. I've had a terrible day, I said. Where did the money go? He froze. What money? The money from our joint account. He sat down. Lauren, I was going to tell you. Tell me what? I invested some of it. With whom? He looked at the floor. My mother. My heart dropped. What? She had a business opportunity? I couldn't believe it. How much? He whispered. About $40,000. I stared at him. You gave your mother $40,000. From our account without telling me? She said she'd return it. When? Soon. I stood up. Call her. He shook his head. It's late. Call her. He didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I walked downstairs. Ethan's laptop was open. I wasn't looking for anything, but an email notification appeared. The sender was his mother. The subject line said, we need to finish this before she finds out. My hands went cold. I opened the email. There were only 3 sentences. The lawyer is ready. You need to convince her to sign. Once the transfer is complete, we can finally move forward. I read it twice. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Ethan? I turned around. He stared at me. You shouldn't have opened that. Those words were worse than anything he could have said. I whispered, what transfer? He didn't answer. What are you planning? Lauren, what transfer? He sat down. I was going to tell you. When? When everything was settled? I felt sick. Settled how? He finally looked at me. Your father's company. I stared at him. My shares? He nodded. Mom thinks you should transfer them. Why? Because we could build something together. You mean you and your mother? No. Then why is she writing emails about it? He had no answer. I walked upstairs. He followed me. Lauren, please. I turned around. Get out of our bedroom. Listen to me. No. I'm your husband. I looked at him. And that's why this hurts so much. He slept on the couch that night. The next morning, I called an attorney next. Her name was Rachel Morgan. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked one question. Have you signed anything? No. Good. She paused. Do not sign anything. I won't. Also, Lauren, I want you to do something. What? Find out exactly where the $40,000 went. I already knew where to start. Victoria, I called her. Can we meet? She sounded pleased. Of course. We met at a restaurant downtown. She arrived 20 minutes late. She sat across from me. You look tired. I've been thinking about the transfer. I looked at her. So you knew? She smiled. Of course. I asked. Where did the $40,000 go? She didn't blink. It's invested. Where? In a business? What business? She leaned forward. Lauren, you're making this unnecessarily complicated. It's my money. It became family money when you married Ethan. No. She smiled. You really believe marriage doesn't mean sharing everything? I believe marriage means honesty. Her smile disappeared. Then she said something I will never forget. Ethan was supposed to be mine before he was yours. I stared at her. What? He was my son before he was your husband. That doesn't make sense. He took him away from me. I realized then that this wasn't about money. It was about control. Victoria didn't want to lose her son. And she believed I was the reason she had. I stood up. I want my money back. She laughed. You're going to destroy your marriage over $40,000? No. I looked at her. I'm going to protect my marriage from people who think they can control it. She leaned back. You'll regret this. I walked away. 2 days later, Rachel called me. We found the account. Where? She hesitated. The money was transferred into a company. What company? Victoria Holdings. I closed my eyes. Who owns it? Your mother-in-law. I wasn't surprised. But Rachel wasn't finished. There is something else. What? The company received several other payments. How much? Approximately $240,000. My heart stopped. From where? Rachel sent me the documents. I stared at them. Most of the money came from a company owned by my husband's employer, Ethan's company. I immediately called him. Ethan, we need to talk. He sounded nervous. About what? Victoria Holdings. Silence. You know about it? I can explain. Then explain. She borrowed money. From your employer? He didn't answer. I said, Ethan, where did the $240,000 come from? I didn't know. You signed the documents. Silence. I couldn't believe it. You signed them? I was told they were legitimate. Who told you? My mother. I sat down. Then I realized something. Maybe Ethan wasn't the mastermind. Maybe he was being manipulated. But that didn't excuse what he had done. I asked, why didn't you tell me? I was scared. Of your mother? Yes. That answer changed something. For the first time, I realized Ethan had spent his entire life afraid of Victoria. She controlled his decisions, his money, his relationships, and now she was using him to control me. I told him, you need to choose. What? Your mother or your marriage? He cried. I choose you. Then prove it. He agreed. The next morning, he gave Rachel every document he had. Emails, bank statements, contracts, everything. And what we discovered was horrifying. Victoria had been moving money between several companies. She had created fake consulting agreements. She had been using Ethan's signature. And she had been planning to use my inheritance as collateral for a massive loan. If I had signed the transfer papers, I would have personally guaranteed the debt. I could have lost everything. Our house. My inheritance. My father's company. Everything. But there was one thing Victoria didn't know. Rachel had already contacted the bank. The transfer was frozen. Now we needed proof. So I did something that scared me. I went back to Victoria. I pretended everything was fine. I told her I had changed my mind. She looked shocked. You're going to sign? Yes. She hugged me. I almost felt sick. She whispered, I knew you'd come to your senses. I smiled. I need one more thing. What? I want to see the full financial plan. She nodded. Of course. She believed she had won. She gave me everything. The contracts. The loan documents. The account numbers. The names of the people involved. And most importantly, her signature. Rachel later told me that document was the missing piece. But Victoria still had one final move. She invited the entire family to dinner. Everyone was there. My husband, his father, his sister, his cousins, and Victoria. I knew something was coming. Dinner started normally. Then Victoria stood. She tapped her glass. I have an announcement. Everyone looked at her. She smiled. Ethan and Lauren are getting divorced. The room went silent. I looked at Ethan. He looked shocked. What? Victoria continued. Lauren has refused to cooperate with this family. Ethan stood. Mom, stop. She ignored him. She has been hiding assets from her husband. I stood too. That's a lie. She smiled. I have documents. She pulled out a folder. Then she said, I think it's time Lauren leaves this family. I looked around the room. Everyone was staring at me. This was the moment Victoria thought she had won. She thought I would cry. She thought I would defend myself. Instead, I reached into my purse and placed a folder on the table. Victoria stopped smiling. I said, before you remove me from the family, perhaps you should explain the missing. $240,000. Her face went pale. Ethan looked at her. What is she talking about? Victoria stared at me. You don't understand. I opened the folder. Then explained these. I placed the bank records on the table. Then the fake contracts. Then the loan documents. Then the emails. One by one, the room became completely silent. Victoria looked at Ethan. You're going to believe her? Ethan's voice was shaking. I've seen the documents. She stared at him. What? I gave Lauren everything. Victoria's face changed. You betrayed me. Ethan looked at her. No. He paused. You betrayed all of us. Victoria started crying. You don't understand what I did for you. You tried to destroy my wife. I was protecting you. You were controlling me. Her voice became louder. You would have nothing without me. Ethan shook his head. I'd rather have nothing than become like you. That sentence destroyed her. She sat down. Her husband, Ethan's father, had been silent throughout dinner. Finally, he spoke. Victoria. She looked at him. Tell me it's not true. She couldn't. He closed his eyes. I defended you for 30 years. She whispered, I did it for the family. He replied, No. He looked at me. You did it for yourself. The police arrived later that evening. The investigation lasted months. Victoria was eventually charged with fraud and financial crimes. The $240,000 was recovered. The loan was canceled. My father's company remained mine. But the biggest surprise came after everything was over. Ethan asked me to forgive him. We had been separated for almost 6 months. He had spent that time in therapy. He had moved into a small apartment. He had finally learned to make decisions without his mother's approval. One evening, he came to my house. He stood at the door. I don't expect you to take me back. I didn't answer. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I looked at him. You were afraid of your mother. Yes. But you let that fear hurt me. I know. Why didn't you stand up for us sooner? He looked down. Because I spent my whole life thinking love meant obeying her. That answer stayed with me. I realized then that Ethan wasn't innocent. But he wasn't the monster I had believed him to be either. He was a man who had finally realized that being someone's son didn't mean surrendering his entire life to them. I didn't take him back that day. I told him I needed time. He respected that. For another year, we lived separately. We went to counseling. We learned how to communicate again, and slowly, I started trusting him. Not because he promised to change, because he actually changed. A year later, we remarried. It wasn't a huge wedding. There were only 14 people. No fancy decorations, no giant ballroom. Just a small ceremony in the garden behind our house. My father wasn't there. I missed him terribly, but I carried a small piece of his old leather wallet in my pocket. After the ceremony, Ethan held my hand. "I'll never let anyone come between us again." I smiled. "You can't promise that." He looked confused. I continued, "Life will always put people between us." Then I squeezed his hand. "The promise should be that we face them together." He smiled. And for the first time in years, I believed him. Today, Victoria is no longer part of our lives. Ethan's father divorced her. The family eventually stopped speaking about what happened. My father's company is doing better than ever. And every year, I donate a portion of my profits to a program. That helps women become financially independent. Because if there is one thing I learned from all of this, it's that financial control can become emotional control very quickly. And I never want another woman to believe she has to surrender everything just to keep her family happy. Sometimes the person telling you they're protecting you is actually the person trying to control you. Sometimes the person who says they love your family is the person destroying it behind closed doors. And sometimes the hardest thing you can do is say, no. I used to think saying no made me selfish. Now I understand. Sometimes saying no is how you protect everything that matters. My name is Lauren Carter, and the woman who tried to take my inheritance, my marriage, and my future taught me the most important lesson of my life. You can love your family. You can forgive your family. You can even give them another chance. But never give someone so much power over your life that you forget. You have the right to choose your own future. Because the day I finally stood up to Victoria wasn't the day I saved my money. It wasn't the day I saved my marriage. It was the day I finally saved myself. And that was worth more than everything she had ever tried to take from me.